In the world of handhelds, a lot of first-person shooting experiences don't come from AAA developers, but from smaller indie developers. Such has been the case for most of the Switch's first-person shooting games outside of Wolfenstein 2 and Doom. And such is the case in the game that we're going to talk about today, a first-person shooter with very heavy emphasis on split-screen and online co-op. Here is my review of Rico for the Nintendo Switch. The story of Rico takes place in Santa Maria, a city overrun by criminal gangs and drug dealers. In response to the police force's struggle to contain the problem, a special task force is made of cops that don't follow the rules and get results by any means necessary. You are part of that team brought to Santa Maria to contain and get rid of the gang problem. This is a pretty interesting little setup and one that really got me interested in the game, at least until I realized that intro cutscene that introduced everything was the only story cutscene in the entire game. The super cinematic cutscene with all the playable characters in it is nothing more than a setup and a reel. The actual game is nothing but gameplay, and none of the characters even talk during gameplay. The only time there's ever voice acting is during the tutorial and that intro cutscene. And I really felt that was disappointing because it led in really nicely, only to have no story at all. When it comes to gameplay, Rico is a first-person shooting game with a heavy emphasis on co-op play and randomly generated dungeons. As you go through each game modes, you're going to do cop busting things like kicking down doors, shooting bad guys, and stealing evidence. Now there are two big things to note here. One, Rico is a co-op centered game. Every game mode can be played solo or co-op, be it local split screen or online. And do note that that local split screen option is only available in docked mode. You cannot do split screen in handheld mode. And two, this is a randomly generated dungeon game. Every time you go into a new stage, be it in a case, operation, or quick job, the entire dungeon will be generated randomly, with different things in the rooms, like different item placements, enemy placements, and enemy types. Now when you get into actual game modes, you've basically got three options. Quick Job lets you do short single matches or dive into the training mode. Daily also has short single jobs, but you have a little bit more variety and your results will be put on online leaderboards. And then we get to the third game mode, which is the meat of the game, known as Case Mode. Instead of just doing a single mission, you take on a case against a crime boss. This gives you a literal web and net of missions that you can go through. Your job is to go from mission to mission to mission to eventually reach the crime boss and take them out. These are also randomly generated, so the missions that you get in one case are going to be completely different for the next case. You can also choose pretty much whatever path you want. You don't have to stay on the same path the entire time, and if you get to the final mission and you don't feel like you're prepared enough, you can actually go back and do the other paths that you missed. And I say prepared because there's a progression system when you're going through each case. Every time you clear a mission, you gain merits to buy new stuff from the armory, from weapons and upgrades to health and defense items. So the more missions you do, the more you can upgrade your arsenal, aka the more prepared you can be when you go into that final high difficulty mission. Just make sure you don't ever die and run out of revives, because if you get a game over, the entire case fails and you start from square one. Now when you actually go and do these missions, you're in a map with a bunch of locked rooms full of enemies, bombs, evidence, and who knows what else. Your main task in each mission is to navigate through all of the rooms and collect all the evidence so you can leave and go on to the next level. There are also side objectives depending on the mission and what is in each room, like defusing bombs, destroying equipment, or taking out so many enemies with headshots. Now actually accomplishing these missions involve kicking down doors and taking out enemies. Since this is a co-op focused game, it is a bit difficult when you want to solo it even on the easy and medium difficulties, but they did add some cinematic features to help with that. Whenever you kick down a door, you get several seconds of slowed down time for you to pop off a bunch of shots on the enemy before you actually do the real-time fight. This is an easy way to completely clear out rooms with ease, or clear out as much as you can before the real fight starts. And this formula comes together pretty well. Kick down doors, shooting off enemies, collect what you can in the room, move on to the next room, and then repeat the process until you're done. Though the game does throw a few surprises your way, because whenever you do secondary objectives, most of the time reinforcements will spawn and you'll have to fight through them on your way out. Now as far as the actual shooting mechanics go, it feels very solid. You've got all of your basic features here like running, sprinting, changing weapons, throwing grenades, crouching. The game's also got quite a few recoil physics built into the game, so it feels a little bit more like AAA shooters than some of the indie shooters that don't have recoil at all. But no matter how smooth the shooting is, and no matter how well the formula comes together for basic gameplay, it feels like there's not a lot here. The cases don't have story scenes attached to them outside of a name on the menu, so doing Case B feels exactly like Case A except slightly different maps with slightly different enemy and item placements. And the fact that there are only 3 or 4 different maps to begin with does not help this game feel repetitive very early in the experience. As you go from case to case, it feels like you're just doing the same thing over and over. Granted, you do get permanent character experience for every operation you can complete that goes towards leveling up and getting special perks. But that's about all there is to do in the game past the first hour or so where you explore cases for the first time. The experience just feels kind of hollow once you get past the novelty of it. There's no difference between the different playable characters outside of the cosmetics of what their hands and gloves look like. And you're going through the same maps doing the exact same things over and over and over to get the same upgrades for all characters. I'm not saying it's not a fun system, but there's not a lot of incentive to keep playing outside of little perks. And that brings us to content and length. There is no campaign mode, so you're basically just going through case by case by case. The length of each operation in a case normally took me about 8 to 10 minutes, so the length of each case can vary between 1 and 3 hours depending on whether or not you went straight for the boss or decided to do some side missions to prepare for the boss. And in my opinion, this just doesn't offer enough content, especially for the $20 digital price and $30 retail price. Now in terms of presentation, I'm a little conflicted. Some parts of the game look really nice and some parts don't. Many of the gun models and textures on the environments look really nice and detailed, but then you can go in the same level and find environments that aren't detailed at all, almost as if they were assets from completely different games. And when we go into performance, there are a couple little nitpicks here too. The frame rate's pretty smooth for most of the game, though it does dip here and there, and the load times are pretty lengthy. We're not talking several minutes for a single loading sequence, but it takes quite a while to load each operation. And now let's go into battery life, which isn't great, but it isn't bad. Rico has a battery range of 2 hours and 34 minutes on high settings, up to 3 hours and 56 minutes on low settings. Now, in conclusion, Rico offers the Switch audience and handheld audience solid shooting gameplay with some good options for split screen and online co-op. Unfortunately though, it lacks more than it gains, with an interesting story setup with no story campaign afterwards, way too few variations in gameplay, and some technical hiccups here and there. It's certainly a fun game, but I don't feel there's enough here to warrant that full $20 price. Reviews to Go rates Rico for the Nintendo Switch a 6 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, or head to the website at reviewstogo.com.